how influential should dressage be? How influential should cross country be? And how influential should show jumping be? And even I have overlooked the most important ingredient of this sport. We're a difficult sport to follow 12 months of the year. We don't compete for 12 months of the year, firstly, so it's a hard sell. Well, you got to keep the essence of the sport, otherwise it disappears. That's literally where we are now. If you watch those 60 rounds, was that all perfect riding? Was that all perfect performance? Far from it. This is not about trying to cause panic or be negative, but I think you have to be authentic and honest. Wow. Brilliant, exceptional performances from brilliant horses and brilliant riders on brilliant courses.
The sport of eventing is evolving, as all sports do. Is that change something that you think we're in control of? Is it, what trajectory are we on as a sport?
Of course some of your evolution is reactionary, okay? I'm not going to say it's black and white. Reactionary to the big phrase social license and things like that. But you know, with technology and all those kinds of things. So of course you're a little bit reacting to what you can do, but the direction you're on, it should be a vision thing. It should be like, this is why our sport is great, and this is how we package it, and this is our recipe, and that really should be it. And I think we have overlooked the most important thing about our sport, which is the recipe. I think we talk about it loosely sometimes, but I think even for myself, like I've been analysing this sport for 15 years, I've been participating in this sport for longer, and even I have overlooked the most important ingredient of this sport, which is our recipe, phase influence. What does it take to win in eventing? Because what it takes to win is going to shape our athletes, in this case horses, their strengths and weaknesses, how we train, how we try to win. It also, which is the reaction side and the protection side, so like how we win, that's our showcasing our sport. Like that's the positive light of the sport. What makes it great? That's influenced by phase influence. But what losing looks like, which is the social license side, that's also impacted by phase influence. And if you want to manage something, if you want to manage your phase influence, if you want to manage the recipe of your sport, and what I mean by that is, how influential should dressage be, how influential should cross country be, and how influential should show jumping be. 10 years ago, the biggest phrase in the sport was dressage competition. Oh, that was a dressage competition. They're right, okay? That formula, that recipe at the lower level, the biggest level of the sport, 2-star level, 50% of the influence is dressage. So that only leaves 20-30 for the other two phases, and actually cross country is the least influential, and that's meant to be the why. That's meant to be the fun, it's meant to be the spectacle. And that has changed our athlete, and that's changed our sport. We'll talk about the top level, the championship level, you know, that now cross country is 4-star rather than 5-star. I actually agree with that for championships. I think to have a level of the sport that's accessible for you want to have 15 nations at a championship. If you're going to call yourself a big, you know, a championship of nations, we know 5-star in eventing is way narrower than that. It's not 15 nations. So I can see the difference, but still influence, you know, it's just penalties. It's not, this doesn't have to mean that cross country is dangerous. That's not how you make cross country influential. You can make it influential many other ways. But we have lost our recipe at the bottom is very different to our recipe at the top. And I would say the second phrase that's really impactful to the sport is the commercial horse. So, you know, the type of horses we have in the sport, if what it takes to win, if the recipe at the lower levels and the phase influence at the lower levels is very heavily weighted towards dressage and then more to show jumping than it is to cross country, those are the type of horses that people are going to produce to sell because they're That's what the market wants, because that is the mass market. Younger riders, amateur riders, even young horses. We don't want to wait. You know, owners, people are riding now on a salary. They don't want to wait for 4 or 5 years after they purchase a horse before the horse can win a competition. They want to be competitive at the low levels. So now we have this commercial horse, and then that's what breeders breed, because that's what the market is dictating. So essentially, if I could sum up where the sport is now, and we'll get to trajectory in a second, but if we could sum up where the sport is now, we've moved from a sport where we used to take cross-country horses, because cross-country was the essence, it was our USP, that was the essence of the sport, and we would train the dressage and train the show jumping. So you had horses like Lebiostat Sam, Fisher Ricana, that they would kind of start off as most natural cross-country horses. They would look at their most comfortable and at their most natural going cross-country, and it was beautiful to watch. And then they improved in the dressage and jumping phases with great training from someone like Michael Young. That was how a champion was made. And they could win again and again. Like Fisher Ricana won 3 Kentuckys, as well as second in a world championship, second in a European championship. Lebiostat Sam, the greatest horse of all time. Now we're seeing these horses who can score really low because they produce exceptional dressage, but they're looking less comfortable on cross-country, because we've moved from training cross-country horses to do dressage and show jumping to now more starting with natural dressage and maybe jumping horses, and then trying to get away with cross-country, trying to get as much of the cross-country out of them as we can. And you're kind of cross-country now, you're visually, you tend to be looking more at a less comfortable athlete. That's not great for our vision. That's not great for our long-term sport. I don't think the recipe is right, and I don't think what it takes to win is right, and I don't think that the pictures we put out there are going to be right until we address the recipe, until we address the phase influence at all levels.
Okay, at all levels, I think is a really important element of this. So you've talked about 3 different types or 3 different levels of the sport, at which I presume, you know, the recipe is quite different. I'm going to take you to, you know, just to kind of bring this back in terms of phase influence. If you just stay with that for a moment in terms of what the dressage phase influence looks like, what the cross-country influence looks like. And Sam, a huge amount of people say show jumping on the final day often is that very influential phase. Start at 2-star and just compare it to a championship or to a 5-star. But what do we mean when we say, let's start with dressage? Dressage phase influence in a 2-star level.
So when we talk about the phase influence, we look at the penalty accumulation on the top 25% of the leaderboard. Because, okay, what it takes to win, just looking at the winner and what it takes to win, is a very narrow view of the sport. It's a very important view of the sport, because what it takes to just that number 1 position is really important. I would always keep an eye on that, and we do. And again, the most influential part of that is dressage. You have to be in the highest percentile in that phase in order to win. But I think to get a broader view of the sport and a better feel for that broader view is to look at the top 25%. That is basically what it takes to be competitive.
Okay, so
we look at the penalty accumulation in each phase. We disregard the winning score. So I'll put it to you this way: a score 24. If you score 24 in dressage and you score 24 in show jumping penalties, 2 very different things. 24 is a brilliant score. 24 in dressage. In show jumping, it's an awful score. It's 6 fences down. And that's because in show jumping, people are scoring 0. But in dressage, the leader is usually on anywhere from around a 24, but down as low as like an 18. We've seen 15s. The problem with that, if someone is scoring an 18, 19, which we've seen at championship level, then someone who's scoring a 27, which is a top 3% of dressage scores at 27, you're 2 fences behind the leader. That's why dressage influence is so strong, is that ability to get ahead. It's the only phase you can really do that. We see about a third of people show jumping clear, so 0 penalties in show jumping. And then in cross country, that's where the variance is. So at low level, at 2-star, you know, you can see 2-star long, you see 50% of people clear inside the time, no problem. That's a regular occurrence. That means you don't have to be that good to go clear inside the time and get the perfect score in cross country. So we see how the influence of penalties on the top 25% of the leaderboard in each competition. So that means you can look at phase influence in a certain competition, and then at the top end, that's where Tokyo, the most recent Olympic Games, because there's 2 phases of show jumping, that is the one competition where we have seen show jumping be the most influential phase, become the most influential phase. But actually, normally, show jumping can sit in the middle at 2-star, and it can actually drop to the least influential at 5-star. You know, we talk about Oliver Townend being world number 1 at the moment. His 6 counting scores, 1 of those has a clear show jumping round. 3 of them have 1 fence down, 2 of them have 2 fences down, and they're his best 6 results. So that's probably where the biggest misconception in the sport right now is the influence of show jumping. It's not as much as people think.
If you're talking about this recipe, and by recipe, again, we're just referring to how much each phase impacts on the final result. So that what we're kind of talking about there is, how do we want to reward our sport, or how do we want to, what do we want our sport to be? You can't get any more points for being faster cross country or for jumping, you know, with more style. You can't get any more points for show jumping clear. I'm thinking horses like Toledo the Cursor, you know, where Vondredi Beats, where actually saw these beautiful show jumping horses. They got 0 for their perfect show jumping round. Fast jumping machines, Colorado Blue type horses. You mentioned Lebios at Exam, horses that were amazing cross country horses. Armada, good example, you know, where you had this amazing cross country horse that had this weaker phase, but particularly, I suppose, when we go to the first phase, we have these 3 phases. 2 of them, you know, the top 1% finish on 0. We don't really have 3 balanced phases because we don't have we don't have the same way of scoring each phase. What are the unforeseen impact of that imbalanced or different version of scoring per phase?
Yeah, it's a good point, because I'm not, this isn't about giving an opinion saying I think cross country should be the most influential phase. That happens to be my opinion. This is much more just about an objective overview as to where we are. I think if that's your USP, I think it should be. But to your point about, so if someone says, no, well, I think the best recipe is that dressage should be 50% of the influence, and then the 2 jumping phases should be split, maybe level, or, you know, whatever way. If that's how someone feels they want the sport to be balanced, that's fine. Again, the point of this is to say we should know we should have a vision. Like any company, any designer of a product should go, I think I want people to buy the why of our sport or our product, and this is what we need to know our recipe, and then we need to stick with that and make sure we're on track with that. So knowing what it is. Now, if people think, okay, well, we think the recipe should be mainly dressage and then the jumping phases, for me, that there's a counter to that, or there's a problem with it, in that the natural properties of the horse are a little bit different. So, and we go to, I said at the top of the video, it's not just what winning looks like or what it takes to win, it's what losing looks like. Rewind the clock 10, 15 years, losing in eventing used to, or where we were kind of looking going, oh, that wasn't great, was it? It was bad dressage tests. Like we used to do a lot of late flying changes, and it didn't look great in the dressage arena. But then we were pretty impressive and inspiring out on cross country, and there were many examples of very impressive, inspiring cross country rounds where you just go, wow, brilliant, exceptional performances from brilliant horses and brilliant riders on brilliant courses, and everything, go back to the spectacle. It was like, wow. Now we have these brilliant dressage tests. They really are. Like Michael Young, Laura Collett, like, you know, those tests, they are flawless and it's brilliant. But then the cross country is harder work. You know, like we saw, particularly when the weather comes, like this is an all-weather sport, an all-weather terrain. And then we're kind of seeing a bit of protection of those athletes as well. If they're not as natural on cross country, we're seeing this divide from, you know, now our Grand Slams and our 5 stars being like, oh, we're going to save our horses. We're not going to go to badminton. We're not going to, you know, we'll do the 4-star short in Kentucky, not the 5-star. That's, again, are you gonna risk losing your why? You know, like commercially, sponsorship wise, if you can't say this is the best of the best, trying to engage fans and getting people to follow the sport, that's kind of our model. We're a difficult sport to follow 12 months of the year. We don't compete for 12 months of the year, firstly. And a lot of the time, we're just looking for peak performance once or twice a season. So tuning in for a 4-star short early in the season, people probably aren't trying to win. So it's a hard sell. It's an even harder sell if now we're not even trying to win the major 5 stars because we have a different horse. You know, we have a championship horse for one thing, and then we have a 5-star horse for another thing. Again, you're adding confusion to the sport.
I would say it's an even harder sell to add one more level to it. If you're asking me to watch exceptional dressage, I'm probably going to go watch dressage.
Pure dressage.
Yeah. And if you're asking me to watch exceptional jumping, we know it's there. Like I can watch amazing 160 level jumping. Everything else stops at Aachen on Saturday afternoon. You know, at the what do they call it? Like the World Equestrian Festival, where you've got the best dressage horses. The world champions are there in pure dressage. The real big prestige is probably what Aachen is most associated with, that Grand Prix and that Rolex Grand Prix on Sunday afternoon. The best of the best jumpers are there. And we've got dressage and jumping on pretty much every day. But on Saturday afternoon or Saturday morning at Aachen, everything else stops. And everybody, all the disciplines, watch cross country at Aachen. You don't need too much to sell it. It's on huge screens and people stand and watch, even without the context, even with the little bits of information that the sport currently gives the fans. People watch because it is an amazing spectacle. But it's on the Saturday morning. The whole of Friday eventing in Aachen, it's okay dressage, but it's not the dressage I've seen for the last 2 days. And the Friday afternoon is fine jumping in the stadium, but it's not the jumping that I've watched before or after. The importance, Sam, of protecting the cross country, be it at 5-star, at championship level 4-star, or at 2-star. And let's stay with 2-star. What does it mean to protect that middle phase, and why?
Well, you got to keep the essence of the sport, otherwise it disappears. That's literally where we are now. Is we're going to now have if we don't have cross country as a skill in our young riders, learning how to get horses fit and learning how to ride good cross country, and good horses that are capable of seeing out, you know, a cross country that is going to inspire people. I think one of the things that captures everyone in sport is when you look at something, and I've heard it already today, I couldn't do that. Okay, that's the key phase. That's what I look at in I think of tennis rallies in Wimbledon, I think of golf shots in golf, and I go, it's actually ridiculous that a human can do that. And in our sport, we go, that's ridiculous that a human and a horse can do that together. That is incredible. So, and then even as I remember walking the course with badminton with Robert Power, who's ridden the winner of the Grand National, who's ridden around the Hickstead Derby, 2 iconic equestrian competitions. And he's like, no. And I said, would you ever do this? No, no, that's a level too far now for me. You know, and that's one of my proudest moments as a rider who was riding around that course and rode well around it that day. I was like, oh, great. So, but we won't, if we lose, we'll have to dumb down the cross country. We'll have to because you're stuck in this situation where you go, oh God, now it's looking uncomfortable. It's not looking uncomfortable because cross country somehow got harder. It's that we've changed, like our recipe of the sport, our influence in the sport means we've changed how we train. We've changed the athletes mainly. It's the equine athletes. We've seen the percentage of thoroughbred drop from 72% 10 years ago down to 56%. They just don't gallop.
That's an average.
That's the average at badminton. And it's the equivalent of, the genetic properties of the competitors that line up in a marathon. We're changing it, and they find it harder. They're not as natural to it. So that's your risk. Now going, oh God, the essence of our sport doesn't look so good anymore. It's not such a good show. So now we're going to make it a bit less. And if you dumb it down too much, the minute you're not inspiring anymore, the minute that someone in show jumping or racing or even just a kid who's riding at home starts to walk around your iconic venues and go, oh, I could do that, that's a problem for you, because you're not going to inspire anymore. So you have to be able to inspire. How you achieve that, like just make cross country more competitive. I think cross country is very much about, in terms of scoring, it's just about the what. It's just, red flag on the right, white on the left, and go clear inside the time. And too many people are achieving that. Dressage is all about the how. We don't talk about dressage going, geez, he did that, really good left turn there and a good circle. It's much more about the how. It's the balance, the rhythm, the suppleness. It's all about how. If how you do dressage isn't very good, you get penalized. Kind of the same in show jumping. I know there's no marks for style, but if you don't ride well in show jumping, you're probably going to get penalized.
Penalized by the course.
Penalized by the course. So that's what you have to do in cross country, is you have to put penalties on the leaderboard. That's why phase influence. That's why it's so simple. When I look at it now, when I look at where we are now, and then I look at the influence in the sport, it just all makes complete sense. Why have we? And I'm not saying that. This is just like a moment of realization. I think it is the most important number. The measurement we talk about in high performance, we talk about in horse sales. If you want to manage something, if you want to manage success, start by measuring it. There you are. So and now we can do it. We can say, okay, generally at 2-star longs, 50% of the influence in dressage, 30% show jumping, 20% cross country. Is that right? It's actually 18% in.
Is that, and are they the actual numbers?
Yeah.
In terms of at 2-star long?
Yeah. And
50% of the influence for this top group of in each competition, 50% of that final score.
Of the top 25% of the leaderboard, of the influence in being competitive, 50% is dressage, 32% show jumping, 18% cross country.
So that means to produce horses, to breed horses,
you want a mover and a jumper. And we all talk about it. I know from buying and selling horses and breeding horses, and that's where people go, oh, might be a 5-star horse, but isn't a commercial horse. Well, the 5-star horse is going to die. It's going to be extinct because it needs to be commercial. So just blend the two, make the two sync, because you need to. Because it would be, imagine if in another sport, what it took to win at under 16s, under 18s, under 21s, under 25s was very biased towards one phase, and then suddenly to win at top level was a different set of strengths. You would have graduates coming through who then weren't very good at the top level, and that would make no sense whatsoever. So then you'd have to, you got to have synergy through the sport.
And is that where we are in terms of the overall trend of what are we seeing in terms of the average dressage scores year on year, or the average cross country impact year on year? Is where I'm going with this is, are we too late? Are we in the middle of something that's past us? Is it I often say when I'm sitting with you, sometimes watching this on a screen, that it feels a little bit like 2006, 2007, when certain people were watching the financial markets crash, because you could see that, certain mortgage-backed securities were all being piled into certain, derivatives, and they were being placed and then sold. And actually you think, oh, I don't know if that's coming, but 99% of the sport, or in that case the world, were looking at something slightly differently. And it feels at times, Sam, if you look at the trend in the sport, in scores across the other phases, are we on a similar trajectory in that it's there for us to see now what's happening,
Yeah.
isn't it?
So average dressage scores have dropped by half a mark per year over the last 10 years. So dressage and the best, actually, I mean, the best have gotten a little bit better. We've seen the best finishing score of all time at 5-star, which was Michael Young in Kentucky, and then London 52, the best ever badminton finishing score as well. So
and the second best,
and the second and third best at Lemulan. And
in terms of finishing scores, though, you were seeing them.
Yeah.
They're
So
all,
scores
they're all
are,
21. They're all 2021, 22, 23. Like
Yes.
all these best finishing scores. Feels like week on week in EquiRatings we're putting out new dressage records
yeah.
and finishing score records, but they're not the records of. I mean, there's the odd one, the Bettina one in Jerez 2002, but those type of dressage tests are hanging on now.
Yeah, exactly. And look, the average has come down significantly. And what's amazing, and we should learn this from a positive point of view, is that the bottom 25% has probably improved the most. Now imagine if we could do that, because if you ask people in governance what's one of your biggest problems, they'll say, oh, well, it's bad riding on cross country. So we had bad riding in dressage and we've improved it a huge amount. So if you want to improve bad riding on cross country, which is where the danger is, which is where the risk is and the poor pictures come from, well, penalize it, make it matter. If you make it matter, people will, and you get, it really impacts being successful, people will improve. Whereas currently you're telling 50%, half of a field, I mean, it's more than that. Like at the Junior Europeans last year, you had 80% clear inside the time. Over 60 people on cross country, 60 young riders, future Olympic champions and the next generation of people in our sport. 80% of them, which is over 60 competitors, got the perfect score on cross country. If you watch those 60 rounds, was that all perfect riding? Was that all perfect performance? Far from it. Absolutely not. But they think they've had their score sheet says that was 10 out of 10. That was perfection. I couldn't have done any better. That's the perfect score. And then you're looking at them riding, going, oh God, that was uncomfortable. That wasn't good. So penalize. That's where I think frangible technology. You've got to penalize good, like with flags and things like that, and how we do it all. The key thing, and what people don't like about frangibles, and I'm the same, and I feel even in Tokyo, it happened to me. It certainly happened to Michael Young. You don't want to penalize good performance, so you've got to get the technology right as to how we penalize and how we make cross country matter. But it's like time penalties and things like that. We saw like Giuseppe Della Chiesa was a genius in Pertoni to really make the time penalties matter.
As in the world championship.
In the world championships, and that is typically a high risk level of the sport. And people would think, oh, to make cross country matter there, you're going to risk. And he produced a low risk course with higher influence, and that's the shining light. That's people going, okay, it can be done. We've got to meet the sport where it is now. In terms of we are where we are. But I think understanding why we're here, because I think people have had different theories. You look back, people will say, look, it was taking the steeplechase out, that changed it, and it's just not practical to bring the steeplechase back. There's ways, if I'll tell you now, for short cross country is more influential than long, because the intensity is higher. So if you make a two-star long, for example, is the least influential level of the sport. A two-star short course
from a cross country
point of view. If you make it if you say, right, it's a two-star short for 6 minutes, and then for the last 3 minutes, instead of having a phase B, we'll just have a zone B, and then you put in your steeplechase fences and your higher speed. You're going to have the influence of time penalties in the first 6 minutes, because it's like a short format, it's more intense. And then you're going to bring in, the steeplechase was always a much safer phase, because it's not fixed fence, it's much more forgiving fence profiles and stuff like that. But you would reward being able to ride, conserve energy, do all the technical stuff, all the interesting stuff in the first 6 minutes, and then be able to finish, at a higher pace, and it would be more influential. Like you'd be promoting all the properties you need, like fitness and stamina. There's loads of ways to solve this problem. It is a very, very solvable solution. We just have to want to do it, and we all have to be on the same page going, yeah, this is this is the direction the sport should go in. We need to get the recipe right, and then how we get the recipe right, we've got plenty of options.
How big a problem is this for the sport?
Again, it's easy to be negative. Like you look at, that's what news is, and it's easy to kind of cause. I don't want to. This is not about trying to cause panic or be negative, but I think you have to be authentic and honest. I don't think we're in a good place because, I think commercially a lot of our events are struggling. We're seeing more iconic venues moving out of the sport, and we're losing more venues than we're gaining. We're not seeing rises in terms of fan engagement and commercial things and stuff like that. And we're becoming a bit split in terms of our, we used to have wait lists and stuff like that, and the best of the best, like our field quality indexes, you used to see them higher at certain competitions and stuff like that. So I think it's a problem. I think forecasting, it just becomes a bigger problem because we've already had to make cross country, we're actually in many ways making it less influential, in terms of the distance and in terms of the questions. And if we continue to do that, then you reach a point where you become uninteresting, I think. So that's the threat. I think we're seeing a problem at the lower level in terms of the enjoyment. I think why people, I think a lot of national governing bodies, I know a lot of national governing bodies, their participation levels have dropped significantly. So that's a huge hit for the sport. Less people are eventing with the official governing bodies of the sport. That's got to be a huge concern. And for that reason, I think it comes down to fun a little bit. We didn't, the lower the level, the more influential the dressage. Do people get into the sport to go and win in the first phase and then just do kind of 2 jumping phases to just kind of tick the box and there's a little bit of movement but not that much? I don't think they did. I think they got into the sport because the cross country is the most fun, and so you want the cross country to be the most influential in terms of what it takes to win. So I think we've got to figure that out.